Professor Xylith Brightscale stood at the towering crystalline windows of the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences, her silver-scaled hands clasped behind her back. The 3 moons of Centuris Prime cast their pale blue glow across the Academy's sprawling campus, illuminating the anti-gravity gardens where students from 100 different species practiced their morning meditation. Professor Brightscale came the melodious chime of her assistant, Luna Sparkweave, a Lumarian whose bioluminescent tendrils pulsed with anxiety. The faculty meeting is about to begin. They're all waiting to discuss the situation. Xylith suppressed an exasperated sigh, a habit she'd picked up from her years of teaching multi-species physics. You mean they're waiting to complain about our newest student acceptance? Again. Well, Luna's tendrils flickered in what Xylith recognized as diplomatic hesitation. You have to admit, accepting a Deathworlder is unprecedented. Especially one from Earth. The way Luna whispered Earth made it sound like a curse word. Xylith turned from the window, her scales rippling with barely contained amusement. Oh please, you're all acting like we're admitting a supernova into a plasma containment field. This human student ranked in the top 0.01% of their planetary academics. Together they glided down the quantum-shifted corridors, passing holographic displays of the Academy's most distinguished alumni. The walls hummed with the subtle vibrations of theoretical physics experiments being conducted in the lower levels. Several junior instructors practically jumped out of their exoskeletons to clear a path, their appendages trembling at the sight of the Academy's most decorated professor. But Professor Luna persisted, consulting her neural interface. Humans are classified as Class 12 Deathworlders. They drink poison for pleasure, Professor. Poison. They call it coffee. Xylith paused outside the faculty chamber, her scales taking on an amused azure tint. Luna, my dear, did you know that humans named their deadliest ocean predator the killer whale and then proceeded to train them to do tricks for food? Their capacity for turning the terrifying into the mundane is precisely why I supported this admission. The faculty chamber doors slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing the assembled teachers. Professor Quantum Wave, with his probability-shifting form, buzzed anxiously in his containment field. Dr. Nebula Storm's gaseous form swirled in agitated patterns, while Professor Mindweaver's 17 eyes all blinked rapidly in clear distress. Ah! Xylith Dean Starforger's crystalline form refracted light in what she recognized as disapproval. Perhaps you'd care to explain why you approved the transfer application of a species that considers running until exhaustion a recreational activity. With pleasure, Xylith replied, her scales shifting to a confident gold. The application came from one Maya Rodriguez, whose thesis on quantum entanglement across gravitational differentials was nothing short of brilliant. The fact that she can also bench press 3 times her body weight is merely an interesting footnote. Interesting. Professor Quantum Wave's form flickered erratically. She listed parkour as a hobby. Do you know what that is? They jump off buildings for fun. And yet Xylith countered, bringing up a holographic display of Maya's credentials. She also developed a theoretical framework for manipulating quantum states using purely mechanical means, something none of our current faculty has achieved. The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of Professor Quantum Wave's containment field. Xylith's scales rippled with satisfaction. Maya Rodriguez arrives tomorrow. I suggest we focus less on her species' peculiarities and more on the fact that we have a genuine prodigy joining our ranks. Unless, of course, you're all admitting that you're afraid of a single human teenager. The indignant sputtering that followed was, in Xylith's entirely professional opinion, absolutely worth the breach in decorum. Tomorrow was going to be interesting indeed. Copyritric student introduction 500 words. Human student Maya Rodriguez arrives. Initial reaction from alien faculty. Setup of academic challenges ahead. At the moment Maya Rodriguez stepped through the quantum teleportation pad into the Academy's reception hall. Professor Xylith knew this was going to be even more entertaining than she'd anticipated. The human didn't appear particularly intimidating, standing at what Xylith's database identified as an average height for her species. But the way she immediately started examining the pad's crystalline structure with genuine fascination, completely ignoring the way half the faculty had retreated to a safe distance, spoke volumes. "This is incredible," Maya exclaimed, pulling out a datapad and making rapid calculations. The quantum field harmonics must be at least 7th dimensional to achieve this level of precision. Oh, hi everyone. Sorry, I just had to check out your teleporter setup. Dean Starforger's crystalline form vibrated with what Exilith recognized as poorly concealed nervousness. Miss Rodriguez, welcome to the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences. We've prepared a special orientation protocol for you. Special protocol, Maya grinned, brushing back her dark curls. You guys didn't put me in a reinforced dorm or something, did you? Because I promise I'm not going to accidentally break through any walls. Well, not unless there's a really good scientific reason for it. Professor Quantum Wave's containment field pulsed with alarm. Did she just make a joke about structural damage? Actually, Maya said, turning to face the probability-shifting professor, your quantum state is fascinating. The way you exist in multiple probabilistic fields simultaneously, that must give you an amazing perspective on wave function collapse. For the first time in recorded history, Professor Quantum Wave was speechless. Luna Sparkweave nervously approached with Maya's schedule. Your first class will be Advanced Theoretical Physics with Professor Brightscale, followed by Quantum Mechanics with Professor Quantum Wave, and then Practical Applications of Multidimensional Mathematics with me, Professor Mindweaver interrupted, all 17 eyes fixed intently on Maya. I must warn you, human student, that my class has a 60% failure rate among species with far more evolved brains than yours. Maya's eyes lit up with pure delight. Multidimensional math? Like actual practical applications? On Earth, we're still mostly theoretical with anything past the 4th dimension. This is going to be amazing. Xylith watched as her fellow faculty members exchanged bewildered glances. They'd expected fear, or at least appropriate intimidation. Instead, they got enthusiasm bordering on glee. Miss Rodriguez, Dean Starforger interjected, his crystalline form casting nervous rainbows. You do understand that these are our most challenging courses. The academic demands will be intense. Oh, perfect. Maya pulled up a holographic display from her datapad, showing complex mathematical formulae. I actually have some theories I'd love to test out, especially about the relationship between quantum entanglement and gravitational waves in a controlled educational environment. You know, for science. The phrase for science sent visible shudders through the assembled faculty. Xylith's scales rippled with barely contained laughter. Oh yes, this was going to be absolutely priceless. Professor Brightscale's advanced theoretical physics class started exactly as chaotically as one might expect when introducing a Deathworlder to a room full of species who evolved on worlds where gentle breeze was considered an extreme weather event. Maya sat front and center, completely oblivious to the fact that every other student had left a 3-meter safety radius around her. Her desk neighbor, a gaseous entity named Whisper Cloud, was practically condensing with anxiety. Today, Professor Brightscale announced, her scales gleaming with academic enthusiasm, will be demonstrating the practical applications of quantum tunneling through controlled micro-singularities. The sophisticated equipment hummed to life, creating a contained field where particles could be observed tunneling through space-time. Everything was proceeding normally until Nexus Prime, a crystalline student who prided himself on perfect precision, miscalculated his input sequence. The warning sirens blared as the containment field fluctuated. A small, but very real, micro-singularity began forming outside its designated zone. Everyone, emergency protocols, Professor Brightscale commanded, her scales flashing warning colors. The alien students initiated their species-specific safety procedures. Whisper Cloud diffused into a panic-stricken mist. The crystalline students entered stasis, and the energy beings retreated to their containment spheres. Maya, however, was already moving. She lunged forward, datapad in hand, fingers flying across the holographic interface. The field harmonics are destabilizing because of resonance cascade. If we can't shut it down, we can at least redirect it. Miss Rodriguez, get back, Professor Brightscale called out, but her warning came too late, or rather, proved unnecessary. Maya had somehow produced a small bag of what appeared to be brown powder. Don't worry, I got this. Hey Professor, quick question, does your containment field use standard Riemann geometry for its base calculations? Yes, but... Perfect. Maya dumped the brown powder into her palm. Because I have a theory about using organic particle dispersal to disrupt quantum field alignments. The microscopic crystalline structure of ground coffee beans should create just enough chaos in the probability matrix to. She threw the coffee grounds directly at the forming singularity. The entire class watched in horror, then amazement, as the micro-singularity's quantum field suddenly stuttered, caught in the chaotic interference pattern created by thousands of irregularly shaped particles. The containment system seized the opportunity, re-establishing control and safely dissipating the anomaly. Silence fell over the classroom, broken only by Maya's enthusiastic voice. Oh wow, it actually worked. I mean, I was about 85% sure it would, but you never know until you try, right? I've been wanting to test that theory ever since I read about quantum field manipulation, although usually I just use coffee for drinking. Professor Brightscale's scales had cycled through so many colors of shock that she'd briefly invented a new one. Miss Rodriguez, did you just save us from a quantum disaster using a human beverage additive? Well, technically it was the geometric irregularities in the ground beans that did it. But yeah, the coffee was just convenient because I always carry some for emergencies. You know how it is with finals coming up. From his safety bubble, Nexus Prime's crystalline form vibrated with disbelief. You ran toward the quantum anomaly. Well, yeah, Maya shrugged, already making notes on her datapad. Someone had to do something. Besides, this proves my theory about organic matter's effect on quantum fields. Professor, would it be okay if I wrote up my observations for extra credit? Whisper Cloud had finally recondensed enough to speak. But you could have been absorbed into a quantum void. Or had your atomic structure reorganized, added another student. Or been scattered across 11 dimensions, Nexus Prime chimed in. Maya looked up from her furious note-taking, genuinely puzzled. Sure, but think about how much we just learned. The coffee grounds created a perfect example of chaos-induced quantum stabilization. This could revolutionize safety protocols for quantum experiments everywhere. Isn't that worth a little risk? Professor Brightscale watched as her other students tried to process the concept of someone considering molecular dissolution an acceptable price for scientific discovery. Her scales settled into a shade of bemused resignation. She'd have to update the safety protocols. Again, class dismissed, she announced. Except you, Miss Rodriguez. I believe we need to have a discussion about the difference between theoretical physics and death-defying physics. 1 week after the coffee versus quantum singularity incident, Dean Starforger called an emergency assembly in the Academy's Grand Hall. The crystalline walls pulsed with anticipation as students from across the galaxy gathered, carefully maintaining their now standard safety distance from Maya Rodriguez. In light of recent events, the dean's form sparkled with diplomatic caution. The faculty has decided to implement a comprehensive practical assessment, one that will test not just your theoretical knowledge, but your ability to apply it under pressure. A holographic display materialized, showing what appeared to be an obstacle course designed by someone with a questionable grasp on the laws of physics, or perhaps too good a grasp on how to break them. The Quantum Gauntlet. Professor Brightscale announced, her scales shimmering with barely contained amusement, will challenge you to navigate through various physics-defying scenarios. You'll face temporal distortions, probability fields, and dimensional anomalies. The student who demonstrates the most innovative and effective solutions will be granted a prestigious internship at the Galactic Science Council. Maya's hand shot up so fast several nearby energy beings flinched. Question: are we allowed to use external tools, or is it just standard Academy equipment? Both are permitted. Professor Quantum Wave's containment field flickered nervously, within reasonable safety parameters. Perfect. Maya was already scribbling in her datapad. Just need to calculate the coffee to quantum ratio. The next few days transformed the Academy into a frenzy of preparation. Nexus Prime spent hours in crystalline meditation, attempting to perfect his molecular harmonization. Whisper Cloud practiced rapid phase shifting between gaseous states. The energy beings formed study groups to calculate the most efficient probability paths. Maya's preparation methods were different. Professor Mindweaver found her in the anti-gravity gardens, jumping off platforms of increasingly concerning heights. Miss Rodriguez, What exactly are you doing?" "Parkour physics," Maya called out, executing a flip that made several of Professor Mindweaver's eyes want to close permanently. "I figured if we're dealing with dimensional anomalies, understanding how my body moves through three-dimensional space is crucial. Also, it's fun." Later that day, Luna Sparkweave reported finding Maya in the quantum mechanics lab, surrounded by cups of various beverages. "Ms. Rodriguez, is that? More coffee and tea, energy drinks, and something called ultra-caffeinated quantum punch I ordered from the student store," Maya explained, carefully measuring liquid densities. "Each has different molecular structures that could affect quantum fields differently. See, coffee worked great for disrupting that singularity, but what if we need to stabilize one instead? Or create a controlled quantum tunnel? Different problems need different solutions." Professor Brightscale discovered her in the library at midnight, buried under holograms of historical physics experiments. "Preparing for the theoretical portion, I see." "Actually," Maya grinned, pulling up footage of various Earth extreme sports. "I'm studying how humans have historically turned dangerous situations into advantages. Did you know we invented something called skateboarding just because it was fun to attach wheels to a board and defy gravity?" The day before the challenge, Professor Quantum Wave found Maya in the experimental lab, modifying what appeared to be standard athletic equipment. "Miss Rodriguez, is that what do humans call it? A basketball?" "Close. It's a rubber ball filled with a specially calibrated mix of my quantum reactive beverages," Maya explained, bouncing it experimentally. "I calculated that if I throw it with just the right spin, it should create a localized probability field disruption. Plus, it bounces. Could be useful." The other students watched these preparations with a mixture of horror and fascination. Their own careful calculations and precise theoretical frameworks seemed somehow inadequate compared to Maya's chaotic blend of physics, athletics, and caffeinated beverages. "She's insane," Nexus Prime declared during an emergency student meeting. "Completely, brilliantly insane. Did you see her testing probability fields by juggling quantum-altered tennis balls?" Whisper Cloud swirled anxiously. "She called it practicing hand-eye coordination for multidimensional space-time navigation." The evening before the challenge, Dean Starforger found Maya sitting cross-legged in the observatory, surrounded by her seemingly random collection of modified sports equipment, beverages, and data pads covered in calculations that somehow combined advanced quantum mechanics with what appeared to be skateboard trick physics. "Miss Rodriguez," the dean's crystalline form refracted curious patterns. "Are you certain about your approach to this challenge?" Maya looked up, her eyes bright with that particularly human mixture of scientific curiosity and complete disregard for conventional wisdom. "Oh, absolutely. I've got my quantum reactive ball for probability field manipulation, my specially calibrated skateboard for temporal sliding, 3 different types of coffee for various quantum effects, and this really cool helmet I modified to help visualize dimensional shifts. Plus, it'll protect my head if the whole thing goes sideways. Safety first." The dean decided some questions were better left unasked. Tomorrow would be interesting, to say the least. The morning of the quantum gauntlet dawned with all 3 moons of Centaurus Prime aligned, a phenomenon that occurred once every 1,000 years. The entire academy gathered in the newly reinforced testing arena, where reality itself seemed to bend and warp around the challenge course. Professor Brightscale's scales glittered as she announced the first competitor. "Nexus Prime, you may begin." The crystalline student approached the first obstacle, a temporal distortion field that caused time to flow in random directions. His carefully calculated approach resulted in him becoming temporally stuck for 10 minutes, simultaneously experiencing Tuesday and Friday until the safety systems pulled him out. Whisper Cloud fared slightly better, using their gaseous nature to drift through a probability maze. However, they became hopelessly scattered when faced with a quantum uncertainty chamber, their particles spreading across multiple possible realities until they had to forfeit. Then came Maya's turn. She stood at the starting line, wearing modified athletic gear that made several professors nervous. Her pockets bulged with various containers of coffee, her quantum reactive ball tucked under one arm, and her probability surfing skateboard held ready. "Begin," Professor Quantum Wave announced, his containment field pulsing with anticipation. Maya launched herself into the temporal distortion field, but instead of fighting it, she threw her quantum reactive ball straight up. The ball, infused with her carefully calibrated mixture of energy drinks and coffee, created a cascade of temporal eddies. Maya used these disturbances like stepping stones, parkour jumping from one stable time pocket to another. Impossible, Professor Mindweaver's eyes all blinked in sync. She's using the temporal instabilities to create a navigable path. "Look out, Luna," Sparkweave called as Maya approached the probability maze. But Maya was already in motion. She dropped her skateboard modified with quantum stabilizers made from compressed coffee grounds and kicked off. The board's wheels left trails of probability collapse behind them as she carved through the maze like a surfer riding waves of quantum uncertainty. She's not solving the probabilities, Professor Quantum Wave realized, his field flickering with shock. She's ignoring them completely and forcing her own path through sheer momentum. The quantum uncertainty chamber came next to space where reality itself became questionable. Maya reached into her pockets and pulled out 3 different thermoses. Time for a little quantum chemistry. She uncapped all 3 simultaneously, creating a rapidly expanding cloud of coffee-based particles that interfered with the chamber's quantum fluctuations. As the other students watched in disbelief, Maya used the resulting quantum static to visualize the chamber's structure. "The coffee particles are mapping the quantum fluctuations," Professor Brightscale exclaimed, her scales turning an impressive shade of scientific amazement. She's created a makeshift quantum imaging system using caffeinated beverages. Maya wasn't done. She retrieved her quantum reactive ball, now charged with temporal energy from the first obstacle, and threw it through the chamber. The ball's trajectory carved a tunnel of stable reality through the quantum chaos. "Physics says this is a totally valid approach," Maya shouted as she dove through the tunnel, emerging on the other side with her hair slightly quantum shifted, but otherwise intact. Next came the dimensional transcendence zone, a space where the normal 3 dimensions became suggestions rather than rules. Other students had spent hours calculating the optimal paths through the higher dimensions. Maya pulled out her modified helmet and what appeared to be a jump rope. Miss Rodriguez Dean Starforger's crystalline form vibrated with concern. "What are you?" Maya began jumping rope. Each swing of the rope, treated with a special mixture of her quantum reactive substances, cut through the dimensional barriers like a knife through butter. She created a series of 3-dimensional bubbles in the multi-dimensional space, essentially forcing a navigable path through sheer human stubbornness and applied physics. She's using the centripetal force of the jump rope combined with the quantum reactive coating to stabilize local space-time. Professor Brightscale's scales were cycling through colors so fast she resembled a disco ball. That's brilliant. The final obstacle was the quantum singularity field, a maze of micro-black holes that had to be navigated without being torn apart at the atomic level. Maya grinned, pulled out her last thermos, and what appeared to be a tennis racket. Miss Rodriguez, Professor Quantum Wave's containment field pulsed with alarm. "You cannot possibly be planning to." Maya served her quantum reactive ball directly into the field, following it with a spray of perfectly calculated coffee droplets. The combination created a cascade of quantum interference patterns that temporarily stabilized the micro-singularities. "Basic physics," Maya called out as she parkour jumped through the briefly stable field. "Everything affects everything else, you just have to know how to mix things up." She landed on the finished platform with a triumphant grin, her hair defying several laws of physics, but otherwise unharmed. The entire arena sat in stunned silence, broken only by the soft sound of Professor Quantum Wave's containment field hiccuping in shock. "Time?" Maya asked, catching her quantum reactive ball as it completed its calculated trajectory back to her hand. 3 minutes, 42 seconds, Luna Sparkweave announced, her tendrils pulsing with disbelief. That's a third of the previous record." Cool. Maya was already making notes on her datapad. "Though I think I could improve the coffee to energy drink ratio for better quantum stability. Also, the skateboard trucks could use some adjustments for better probability surfing. Oh, and next time I should definitely bring a helmet-mounted camera." The quantum imaging effects were amazing. Professor Brightscale's scales had settled into a shade of resigned admiration. Ms. Rodriguez, you do realize you just revolutionized several fields of quantum mechanics using sports equipment and caffeinated beverages. Really, Maya looked up from her notes, genuinely surprised. I just figured since quantum mechanics is all about how things interact, why not use things that are fun to interact with? Besides, parkour through quantum probability fields is way more interesting than just calculating safe paths. The other students, still trying to process what they'd just witnessed, could only watch as Maya began explaining her quantum parkour theory to an increasingly fascinated Professor Brightscale. Several of them were beginning to suspect that humans hadn't survived their death world by being tough, they'd survived by being too creative for physics to handle. Following Maya's unprecedented performance in the quantum gauntlet, Dean Starforger called an immediate faculty meeting. The crystalline walls of the chamber vibrated with the intense debate raging within. Order, please. The dean's form sparkled with authority. We must address the unique solution Ms. Rodriguez demonstrated today. Unique. Professor Quantum Wave's containment field rippled with what could only be described as academic hysteria. She turned fundamental quantum mechanics into an extreme sport. Professor Brightscale's scales shimmered with barely contained delight. Yes, and in doing so, she proved that controlled chaos can be a valid approach to quantum manipulation. The implications for our current theoretical frameworks are staggering. Then perhaps Professor Mindweaver's 17 eyes glinted with sudden inspiration. We should present her with one final challenge, something that will either validate her methods or prove them to be merely lucky accidents. The challenge they devised was simple in concept but supposedly impossible in execution: create a stable bridge across a quantum void at tier in space-time that rendered all known physics questionable at best. When presented with the task, Maya's eyes lit up with that now familiar combination of scientific curiosity and complete disregard for conventional impossibility. Cool. Can I have an hour to prep? That hour sent the medical staff into a frenzy as they watched Maya raid the cafeteria, the sports equipment storage, and the quantum physics lab in rapid succession. She returned carrying what appeared to be a modified tennis net, several thermoses of various beverages, and her trusty quantum reactive ball. Okay, I think I've got this figured out. Ms. Rodriguez, Dean Starforger began. The quantum void cannot be crossed by. Maya was already in motion. She served her quantum reactive ball directly into the void, following it with a precise spray of what she later described as a quantum cocktail, a carefully calculated mixture of coffee, energy drinks, and, surprisingly, chocolate milk. The lactose creates interesting probability matrices, she explained as she unfurled the tennis net, which had been treated with her remaining quantum reactive substances. What happened next defied every known law of physics, except perhaps Murphy's law. The quantum reactive ball, charged with the energy of the void itself, began bouncing in a perfect figure-8 pattern. The spray of beverages, instead of being consumed by the void, created a lattice of stable quantum points. Maya threw one end of the modified tennis net into the chaos. Instead of being torn apart, it caught on the quantum lattice she'd created, stretching across the void like a glittering bridge of impossible physics. See, Maya grinned, already making notes on her data pad. If you give chaos enough structure, it becomes a new kind of order. Also, the chocolate milk was totally key. Who knew calcium could stabilize quantum fluctuations? The assembled faculty watched in absolute silence as she casually walked across her quantum tennis net bridge, pausing halfway to take readings with her modified helmet. The void isn't really empty, she called out excitedly. It's more like a quantum soup. We could totally study this. Oh, maybe we could set up a permanent observation post. I bet if we combine my quantum cocktail formula with some basic construction principles. Professor Brightscale's scales had settled into a new color, one that perfectly represented the moment when impossible became merely improbable, and improbable became innovative. I believe, she announced to her still stunned colleagues, we need to reconsider our definition of conventional physics. And safety protocols, added Professor Quantum Wave weakly. And the budget for caffeinated beverages, Luna Sparkweave chimed in. Maya, now safely across the void, was already sketching designs for what she called a quantum parkour training course. The faculty realized, with varying degrees of resignation and excitement, that this was just the beginning. In the months following Maya's quantum-defying performance, the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences underwent some significant changes. The most notable was the newly installed experimental physics safety net, a system specifically designed to handle what the faculty now termed human-style innovation. Professor Brightscale's curriculum was updated to include what she called applied chaos theory and caffeinated physics. Her scales would turn a particularly vibrant shade of gold whenever she showed footage of Maya's quantum void crossing to new students. The Academy's cafeteria now stocked 17 different varieties of coffee, including the newly created quantum mocha, inspired by Maya's legendary quantum cocktail. Even Professor Quantum Wave had taken to keeping a small cup of it in his containment field for emergencies. Perhaps most surprisingly, applications from human students increased by 300%. The Academy had to establish new guidelines specifically stating that not all physics problems can or should be solved by skateboarding through them, a rule that Maya insisted was more of a suggestion, really. During the graduation ceremony, Dean Starforger's crystalline form sparkled with newfound wisdom as he addressed the assembled students. This year has taught us that sometimes the most unorthodox solutions are the most brilliant, though perhaps we could achieve brilliance with slightly less property damage. The Galactic Science Council, impressed by Maya's innovative approaches, not only offered her the internship but also established a new research division, non-conventional physics applications, their first project, studying why Earth's supposedly deadly liquid dihydrogen monoxide water could be used to surf probability waves when properly caffeinated. As for Maya Rodriguez, she was last seen proposing a new thesis, quantum parkour, a study in multidimensional athletic applications. Her only comment to concerned faculty members was, "Don't worry, I brought helmets for everyone. Also, who's up for some quantum skydiving?" Professor Brightscale's scales turned that new shade of resigned admiration once again. Humans, it seemed, hadn't just adapted to their death world, they'd learned to have fun with it.